Hello and welcome to News Desk. I'm Jared Reid.
And I'm Pablo Foley, Elias.
This week we're looking at the severe air pollution crisis in India and Pakistan that's threatening the health and lives of hundreds of millions of people. This comes as the UN holds the COP29 climate talks in Azerbaijan. And so one question we're asking this week is if India and Pakistan can put aside their long-standing rivalry to cooperate on their common problem, which is air quality.
So clearing the air with a bit of climate diplomacy.
Exactly. We're going to talk about these regional efforts to tackle pollution. And I also mentioned COP29. We're going to get a broad outline of the positions of both India and Pakistan there, where they stand on global climate action and who should be taking the lead on that.
And we are going to pay the estimate, and who's going to pay the estimated $1 trillion a year needed to tackle the climate emergency. Maybe you've got some ideas about that, so please do write your questions, as always, in comments in the chat, and I'll bring them into the discussion.
There are some big questions to discuss. Luckily, we have a good team to help us do that. Sandra Petersmann is DW's Bureau Chief in Delhi. She's going to give us India's perspective on all this, and we're going to find out what it's like to actually be in Delhi at the moment and how smog is impacting the health and quality of life of people. We're also joined by Louise Osborne here at the table, DW's Chief Climate Reporter. She's going to help us understand COP29, why it's so important, and what's being done here at these talks to maybe address pollution and smog.
And let's not forget, of course, a very familiar face here on News Desk is Beenish, Javed, DW reporter, who's reported extensively from South Asia, most recently from Bangladesh and also India and Pakistan. You've been talking to us a lot, so it's great to have you here too.
And Andrew Devine.
Of course, Andrew Devine. How could I forget? Sorry, Andrew. Andrew is with us this week, keeping an eye on all the comments that are coming in, and we have been getting some comments already. And, of course, Andrew has the poll for us.
Indeed. OK. Hi, guys. And, I see some of you have already been in there and voted. Our question this week is, what would be the most effective way of cutting air pollution in India and Pakistan? And there are 4 options. The first is reduce stubble burning. The second is cut industrial emissions. The third is invest more in clean energy. And the fourth is if they started working together, meaning India and Pakistan, as has been suggested in the last few days. So get your votes in and we'll give you the results a bit later.
That's great. Thanks, Andrew. And, of course, Andrew will be giving us all the comments as well, and I'll be putting those to the guests today.
And before we properly get underway, we need to sort of tell you that there's been a bit of sickness that's swept through the News Desk team. That's meant that you and I, Pablo, are sitting here in the host desk chairs today in place of Melissa Chan and Michelle Stockman, both of whom are unfortunately unwell this week. So we do wish them a very speedy recovery. We hope they'll be back soon. We're sure they will be, and maybe they're watching us right now. So
absolutely. So get better soon, Michelle and Melissa. And I'll actually just bring a couple of comments just to get us started, because we have had them coming in, thanks to Andrew, who's been keeping a close eye on them. Some questions already being put to us. People have been saying as well, with regards to the situation, that this happens every year and it only gets exponentially worse each time. Hopefully the practice of crop stubble, which we'll be talking about and explaining throughout the show, crop stubble burning will be banned by the 2030s. Also, we have another comment here from one of our viewers. I'm not even going to try and actually pronounce this, but I can't pronounce it, so I'll leave it there for the moment. It says, this problem is due to farmers and no political party has spined to stop the farmers for the fear of losing their vote share. And finally, a couple of questions which maybe we can actually get to in the show from Harold Peterson. Here, what are some of the health repercussions of living in a polluted city long term with terrible air quality? Would it be as bad as smoking? So there you go. We've got some comments already, and we'll get back to that one. I think we can almost answer that. Not good, I would say.
I don't think it's very, very healthy. Thanks a lot, Harold, and thank you to everyone. Please do write in your questions and comments, and thank you, Pablo, for that. Now, I want you to take a look at this. Pablo, if you can bring up this NASA satellite photo from space taken over the last week. We can take a look at that. This is smog clouds over India, including the capital of Delhi, extending further west over to Lahore in Pakistan, two of the most polluted places on Earth these past few weeks, cities choked with thick and toxic smog. Air quality in both places has reached hazardous levels well past 300, into the many hundreds, actually, according to the Swiss firm IQ Air. Just to give you a bit of a picture, a rating of good, according to IQ Air, is between 0 and 50, and this is a bit of a comparison.
Good would look like.
This is what good would look like. So this was taken
on October 3rd.
Right. So a very intense, severe crisis indeed. Now, authorities in both countries declared a health emergency, hospitals reporting a surge of cases of asthma and other breathing disorders. Before we kind of get the perspective of Delhi and Pakistan as to what it's like living there, let's hear from some residents right now in Delhi. They've told us what they've been experiencing.
Today, the entire north of India has been pushed into a medical emergency.
I feel irritation in my eyes. I just came from my home. My eyes are burning and I'll have to wash them. I'm also finding it difficult to breathe.
I'm feeling very uneasy.
It concerns me that I even have to wear a mask at home.
The pollution is so bad, even at 5 a.m. when you wake up. So much smog.
We're facing a lot of difficulties. People are getting sick because of the pollution.
It's severe. This air isn't fit to live in.
A really terrible situation there in Delhi, as those people were describing. I want to bring, first of all, Sandra Petersmann, our Delhi Bureau Chief, in. Sandra, welcome. It's great to have you on. You've obviously been living through, you and many others have been living through this crisis over a long period of time. Just tell us what it's like to be there right now and to have been there over the past couple of weeks.
Well, you see me here in our studio, and of course we are running air purifiers to keep myself and DW staff here safe. But the moment I step out, I do wear an FFP2 mask like I would do in the old Corona times. That is the one thing I can do as I step out to protect myself. Obviously, we are all advised to stay indoors as much as we can. And I'm a runner, Usually I would go running 3 times per week, which is nothing I can do at the moment, because with running you actually inhale all the deeper, and that can cause even more serious effects than just breathing in normally. And a lot of people here, scientists actually suggest that breathing Delhi's air unprotected equals smoking about 50 cigarettes a day. And that comes back to the one user asking, so is it like smoking? Yes, it is, and it's worse than that. It's like chain smoking.
Sandra, just go into it a little bit for us. How is this affecting people there? And I can imagine, depending on your level of wealth and privilege, it's affecting many different people in particularly different ways. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Let me take you to my home. So at home, I'm running 3 air purifiers, 1 in my bedroom at night and 2 in my living room. When I switch them off at night and then enter my living room again in the morning, I have one of these digital AQI readers, and then the little machine, I call it my digital egg, tells me that the AQI inside my flat without air purifiers is above 500. And that, of course, is, you can imagine. So the pollutants actually enter the flats as well. And I can afford air purifiers, 3 of them. I keep them running to keep myself safe. But look at the majority of people in Delhi. Millions and millions can't do that. Delhi, the greater national capital region, is over 30 million people. And also, if you run them, obviously you yank up your electricity bill. That might also be a consideration with a lot of people who actually have them. When and when not, they are using them, because, if you can't pay your electricity bill, you're having another issue served because of the air pollution. And for me, obviously, I really try to stay indoors a lot, and my job, if I'm not out reporting, allows me to do that. But look at the millions who have to be outside, who don't have a choice. All those laborers, the wage laborers, the daily daily laborers, the guys who bring your food, the delivery guys, for instance. They don't have a choice. They have to be out there. And at the moment, construction is halted here in Delhi as a measure to bring down the concentration of fine particulate matters in the air, which is 50 times higher than the recommended levels of the World Health Organization. They are actually at the moment losing their job because these wage laborers who work in construction, first of all, they keep on breathing very, very unhealthy, hazardous air, and they lose out on their daily wages, which is making their lives all the more miserable. So it's really the poor people of Delhi who pay the price for this public health crisis.
And we've just been seeing some pictures from Delhi over the past few days. Sandra, you were just talking about people losing their jobs. This is really having some severe economic impacts on many, many people.
It is, and you find a very divided pictures. As I said, a lot of people don't have a choice. They have to stay outdoors. The wage laborers, a lot of the migrant laborers who come to Delhi because they seek a better life are now kind of stranded, waiting for the pollution to pass, for construction to continue to earn their daily living. And being here, being exposed to this kind of hazardous pollution without any protection is having immediate effects. You have a lot of people coughing, wheezing, with watering eyes and runny noses, all of that. So the hospitals have been filling up in the last couple of days. But let's also talk about the long-term effects here, because we are really talking about fine particular matters, PM2.5, PM10 they are called. They're so tiny that as you inhale, they can actually enter your bloodstream. They lodge deep in your lungs, causing long-term damage. They can cause severe cardiovascular diseases, respiratory diseases, all the way up to causing cancer, you know. And there has been a recent study which was released in July this year by the medical journal The Lancet, focusing on 10 Indian cities. And the study suggests that about 7% of premature deaths in these 10 Indian cities can be attributed to air pollution. It is very visible at the moment in Delhi, but it's not like we have good air or clean air in other times of the year. Very, very few days here in Delhi are in the category that the WHO would consider good. We have some moderate days, but we are more often than not in the bad category, and then after bad comes the ugly category, the hazardous category. So we are breathing unhealthy air throughout the year, and now it's particularly bad with winter setting in. Stubble burning has been mentioned, and also the colder temperatures press down these fine particular matters and concentrate them on the ground, and we keep on inhaling them.
Yeah, I just wanted, you mentioned these hazardous graph, and Pablo, you can maybe bring that up on your screen and talk us through a little bit of the different sort of categories of severity of the air.
That's right. Good to see you, Sandra. Great to hear from you as well, and hear exactly how difficult it is living in those conditions. Yeah, I've been looking at these graphs of the air quality, and as Sandra is explaining there. So on your screen at the moment, we're looking here. Here's the actual air quality, the New Delhi Air Quality Index right now, which is 428. As you can see, it's hazardous. They do have this sort of little kind of cute little cartoon to show, but the cartoon is not looking too good, as you can tell. And then it breaks down what all the major air pollutants are in New Delhi, all what it is, sulfur dioxide, particulate matter, all these kind of different areas that are covered. And then if we actually look at the historical air data, which is, Sandra, what you've actually been mentioning too is that, you know, it's particularly bad at the moment, but it's not like the air quality is kind of good generally in Delhi. And as we're seeing over the past 30 days, at no point has it actually been good,
right,
at all. So that cannot be good for people living in that area. So, Sandra, how do people actually cope with this? I mean, surely if this is, at the moment, sure, it's an extreme situation, but obviously an extreme situation that's going on for quite a while. But is it just that people have almost normalised that, you know, the air quality in Delhi is not good and they just go about their lives and then there are sort of issues with health in this area and sort of the system is set up in a way to deal with it?
I am often stunned that this air pollution crisis is actually not leading to mass demonstrations. You know, probably in many other democracies we would see mass demonstrations because this is a huge policy failure as well. But here, many people, it also depends on who you ask, are just kind of content. Many have accepted it as a way of life almost. You know, they bring out their masks again. It's almost like, yeah, it's that time of the year, Groundhog Day. So let's just wait till the end of January when, you know, spring slowly sets in and weather conditions bring more wind to disperse the air pollutants. I'm really always surprised also as I step out to see only very few people in the general street picture wearing masks to protect them. Often I feel I'm the only one when I'm commuting to work in the mornings. I would usually do that by bike or by walking, which I'm not doing at the moment. And if I take the three-wheeler, the auto rickshaw, I'm wearing my mask. My rickshaw driver is not. And when you try and ask them, they say, well, madam, what can I do? You know, it's just part of life. We have to carry on and it will soon pass. And also, if you sometimes pass greener areas of Delhi, like parks, you still see people running. You still see people speed walking as if pollution almost wasn't there. So these are the people that I think have accepted it as a fact of life. And speaking about politicians, which I'm sure are running multiple air purifiers at home, I often feel that it's like passing on the bucket, you know. We wait till it sort of fades out. I have been living here before, between 2012 and 2017. It was already really, really bad then. Then I had a 6 years break in Berlin, and then moving back in January this year, I was already preparing myself for what to come, because it is almost as if nothing has changed, as if these 6 years of me being back in Germany and then coming back, as if nothing has happened in between. There is no improvement. All what you see is this stopgap measures that are trying to put like a little Band-Aid on a big festering wound that doesn't want to go away. And in order to also motivate people to take this hazardous area a little bit more serious and hold their politicians to account, would at some point take political will. And I feel that is crucially lacking here. It's not a policy priority in India.
Sandra, thanks a lot for that. I want to bring you in here, Beenish. How much of what Sandra has been speaking about is applicable a little bit further over in Lahore, which has also had its own very bad air quality experiences recently and of course, a lot in the past as well.
One thing that is surely common is the lack of political will. And I think one reason why many people are not demonstrating or not coming out on streets and protesting, because they really don't know that it's the government that is partially, if not fully, responsible for what's happening, because it's also quite technical. Like for many people to understand that government can make a difference, they can control air pollution, they can implement policies, they can take measures. And this, it's not like this has happened for the first time, it's a recurring event, it happens every year. And the governments, there's lack of political will, lack of seriousness. They're not taking environment and air pollution seriously. And this now, but what has happened this time is that they're completely shocked. They don't know what to do, how to deal with this. There's
the government,
also
you mean?
The governments, because there's also international pressure now. Millions and millions of people have been affected by this episode of smog. Like in Lahore, not only in Lahore, in Punjab province, and at least in two big cities, Lahore and Multan. And we are talking about millions of people. Only Lahore is 14 million residents. And there was at one point around 70,000 patients were going to the hospital every day with respiratory diseases, asthma, lung problem, breathing problems, eye irritation. And so it's not only that people are, it's not only that, they're home and they're affected, it's actually a health crisis.
Beenish, just wait a second. We've got the perspective of some doctors, actually. Now that you're just mentioning these health impacts, some doctors in Lahore were speaking about this. Let's listen to them.
It is more emergency than COVID-19 because every patient is suffering from respiratory tract infection and the disease is preventing at a mass level.
More than 7,000 have presented with the eye infections. They have presented with the conjunctivitis, which is because of the allergy to the particulate matter in the smog. And also more than 6,000 people have presented with ear, nose and throat infections. We should also remember that all those people who have respiratory issues, who have asthma or chronic obstructive airway diseases, all of these patients find it very difficult to lead a normal life during smog.
So some doctors in Lahore speaking a little bit earlier about some of the health impacts of this terrible smog. I kind of want to get into some of the causes of this. Let's start with Lahore. Why is this happening?
So, unlike India, Pakistan does not have reliable data, but still, according to some UN agencies, according to some environmental agencies, there's an estimate that majority of the pollution, air pollution in Pakistan, in the current episode, is coming from traffic. So emissions from vehicles and also factory emissions. That's the number one cause. But in India, it is stubble burning, that's number one cause. So in Pakistan, the majority of emissions or majority of the PM 2.5 or the particulate matter, which is the main constituent of smoke, and of course, it's a toxin. Majority of it is coming from factory emissions and vehicles. Secondly, then it's coming from stubble burning and then some other sources. Yeah.
For people who aren't kind of clear what that is, can you explain to people what stubble burning is?
So every year from October to December, farmers in the Punjab region, and Punjab, Pakistan, Lahore and Delhi are basically divided by a border. It's the same province, Punjab, which was divided during partition of Pakistan and India.
Looking at pictures
and you can see what farmers do. They burn the remains of the crops or stalks because they don't know what else to do with that. And this practice has been going on for this is like it's a historical practice. They do it every year. And this is a major problem in Delhi, I would say, in the outskirts of Delhi. And the government has tried some techniques. For example, there's like a satellite that monitors stubble burning so that those farmers can actually be punished. But then what farmers are doing, they're tricking the system. This is what Indian media has reported, that they're tricking the system. What they do, they know that at this particular time, the satellite is going to capture the data. So they don't burn the stubble at that time. They burn it like at different times. But then there is lack of patrolling, there is lack of monitoring. So the government can still monitor the burned areas and can still, enforce some punishments or strict laws to prevent that. And politics is also a factor.
Thanks a lot, Beenish. Sandra, I just would like you to weigh in on what Beenish has just been saying and perhaps go into some of the factors as to why the government hasn't quite been able to get this under control, particularly when it comes to this stubble burning, crop burning that happens every year.
Yeah, the stubble burning is actually right now at this point of time in the year, it is a contributing factor. It's a large contributing factor. But there are, like Beenish said, also other contributing factors. Delhi as such, the national capital region here, can't change its geography, you know. It's like in the northern plains of India, it's surrounded by deserts. So there is pollution, dust coming into the city. It is a very dusty city as it is. We have a huge construction boom in the city, a heavy infrastructure boom in the city, more and more cars and any kind of vehicles on the road leading to emissions there. The coal-fired power plants, the rising energy consumption, people burning rubbish, then the huge landfills of rubbish just outside of town, which also often burn. So it's really, it's many factors contributing to this kind of smog shield that we are seeing at the moment. It's really a little bit like Armageddon sometimes when you step out. The other day I was flying into Delhi and I came from a rather not polluted direction, and then as you approach Delhi you can really see this big clock of smog hanging over the city, and as you then descend into the airport to the landing strip, you can taste it, you can see it, you can feel it, and then it's time again to bring out your FFP2 mask. And I would second what Beenish has said. It needs a multi-sectoral approach, it needs political will, it needs cross-border cooperation for sure. And here in Delhi, it would mean the state government working with the national government and also with the surrounding federal states of India and neighbors like Pakistan to get this under control. Not just doing the quick fixes, but really looking at long-term solutions here. Different urban planning, different traffic planning, all of that needs to be factored in.
Let's talk a little bit more about this political will, and I'd like to bring you in, Louise Osborne, DW's chief climate reporter. You've been following the UN climate conference. Sandra's talked, I guess, a bit about all the many different factors that have contributed to this smog. But to what extent has air quality and the smog been an issue at these COP29 talks in Azerbaijan?
I mean, it's definitely been talked about on the sideline of the conference, particularly with what we're seeing in India and Pakistan at the moment. But it's worth saying that, you know, air quality in general is not good in many places. Obviously, we're seeing a particularly bad case here, but this is also an issue across China, for example, South America, also different parts. The WHO actually says that about 99% of the global population is dealing with air that is full of pollutants. So this is a big issue.
99%, did you say?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
OK.
So, you know, I mean, even here in Berlin, we have bad days where air quality is bad. As I said, not quite as bad as what we're seeing in Delhi, but, you know, it is a problem. And it comes down to the emissions that we are, you know, putting out, whether it's for industry, our vehicles and transport sector. And this is everything that is being discussed at the moment at COP. 29 and how they can reduce those emissions and also put in place funding to try to reduce those emissions further.
Yeah, I want to speak a bit more about COP a little bit later with you, but sort of go back to the situation of India and Pakistan in this particular problem that they are sharing, this horrendous toxic smog, and sort of pose the question, can these two regional rivals actually come together and form a common solution? Because that's what authorities in India and Pakistan have been proposing fairly recently, to come together and to try and jointly address the issue of air pollution. Sandra Petersmann, what's your take on this? How could this possibly look like in practice?
Well, it all sounds very well and is much appreciated if there were actually real initiatives to make that happen. But I take that with a huge pinch of salt, because here in India, the authorities can't even get their act together at the local level, at the regional level, at the national level. They are not working together. They're fighting each other. There is political bickering happening instead of looking for solutions, you know, enforcing laws and all of that. So the state blames the center blames the state, and both blame Pakistan. So it's like passing the bucket on to the next stop, but not really working together in a coordinated effort. If that were to be the case, I think that would be crucial to bring down emissions, because that is really what needs to happen. Cutting off emissions, that is the solution for this region, and that can only happen together, as pollution does not know national boundaries.
Beenish, what's your take on this?
I want to be a bit optimistic. I think climate change and this crisis, smog crisis and air pollution, actually offers, after many, many years, a situation which can push countries like India and Pakistan to finally start talking to each other, to finally have a dialogue and work together, because no government alone can resolve this crisis. And there are ways that many observers, many experts have suggested where these two countries can start working together. We have seen, as you've mentioned, small initiatives that the Chief Minister of Pakistani Punjab province said that she is going to write a letter to the Chief Minister of Indian Punjab and ask him if, both the countries can collaborate with each other. And now Pakistan is planning to have a regional climate conference this year or maybe next year. And they would like India and also other regional countries, which are also affected by pollution, such as Bangladesh, Bhutan and other countries, to work together. I think there are areas where if there is a political will, and I think this issue is so dire and so bad, the situation is so bad that maybe there will be like some opening up of dialogue. So, for example, Pakistan and India both have very good environmental institutions. They are not heavily funded because environment is not a top priority, but there are working functional bodies that can work together, they can collaborate, they can research together, they can share data together. For example, Sandra just mentioned air purifiers. Pakistan is weak on that technology. It can benefit by working with India. Then technology can be used. Technology can be shared between the two countries. And I'll quickly want to bring China in the conversation. So when we talk about region, there's one country in the region that, despite its criticism, as you've mentioned, despite the criticism, they still have shown good results in combating air pollution. So China in 2013 launched a war against air pollution program.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that program did help around in 74 major cities. Air pollution was reduced by 40% over a period of from 2013 to 2020, and deaths, around 60% deaths related to air pollution were also decreased. So if the three countries really work together and make science a form of diplomacy, it's very idealistic, I believe, but it's also a reality because they have to share these good practices. Yes, Sandra, I think you want to...
Sandra, go ahead. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a little bit difficult. I would love to be in the studio with you guys, obviously. But seconding what Beenish said, I can only see you on my small smartphone down there with a little bit of delay. But great to see you all. What I wanted to bring in here is maybe what's needed to make that happen. And let's be idealistic here. I'm all for idealism, obviously, is people in the streets, people demanding from their elected politicians to work together, to cooperate. If we maybe see more public pressure visible in the streets, maybe that could make a difference. We have seen it in India, for instance, totally unrelated matter during those horrendous rape cases, where we saw a huge public outcry and thousands of people in the streets eventually led to policy changes, to stricter laws, to also better law enforcement. That is what needs to happen. And maybe this public pressure could in the end lead to better policy making, to better decision making, and to a more holistic, multi-sectoral approach that would cross boundaries.
Sandra, I've actually got a comment from one of the people who are watching this live stream of News Desk. Silver Star is their name. They said people just need to educate themselves. Basically, people are just okay with that. And then this is something I'd like to know from you, who's on the ground there in India. This viewer says, Indian media don't cover or discuss this issue like they do internationally. Is that the case? You were saying before that it's almost like it's not even a priority. So is it also not a priority in the media?
It depends on what kind of media you're watching or consuming. I would say it is covered well by many Indian media, but then depending on what channel you tune into, I think you don't really get to the juice of it, you know. There it's like almost like a weather phenomena, something that will go away, but those really in-depth discussions, they are happening. They are mainly happening on social media, shall I say, on maybe smaller outlets in the English language press. I'm not able to read Hindi, so I cannot really tell you what's going on there, but I'm sometimes really stuck stunned by the lack of awareness when I talk to people and they ask me, why are you wearing a face mask? And then I start explaining to them why I think it's better to wear a face mask in this kind of condition. And then often you get a smile and they wish you well, but I don't think that they would take this home and then start wearing a mask themselves. In order to create this awareness, maybe we also need to see changes in the curriculum to really make this public health crisis a public policy matter that penetrates society deeply.
Very interesting. Louise, I want to bring you in here. If we're talking about cooperation in this particular context, what are some of the practical measures that these two countries could go about bringing down their smog, bringing down their emissions? I mean, I'm thinking of, Beenish has talked about poor fuel quality, perhaps better fuel quality, better public transportation, more efforts to decarbonise economies. Can you talk around that a little bit?
I mean, that would definitely be something. I mean, all of the countries anyway around the world need to move towards decarbonisation, and India in particular, as the third biggest emitter, is also, under that obligation and is trying to do that through, the electrification, for example, of public transport, also by looking at investing in things like green hydrogen to power some of the sectors that are most polluting, like steel production. It's also investing heavily in renewable energy, and that is going to be the way forward when they start to move away from coal, which unfortunately has not happened yet. So these are the kind of things that they need to do more of to try and move in that direction. And I think that obligation is more on, countries like India, emerging economies, than countries like Pakistan that actually are, suffering more as a result of the impacts of climate change that we're seeing.
I would just like to add, I think there's one agreement between Pakistan and India that despite the difficult, complicated diplomatic relationship, it still exists. It was signed in 1989. It's Malé Declaration.
That's right.
And it is specifically on air pollution. And there were other agreements as well. There was one on data sharing, but because in 2019, the Indian government, it was sharing data on before flooding or something like that, but it was stopped because of the tension between the two countries. So that could be activated. And now that there is little willingness, even if there's little willingness from both sides, I think that could be activated. And then both of the countries, I think, can also invest a lot, can work together to maybe introduce electric vehicles, offer good incentives for people to invest. It's still, I would say, any solution that we see is going to be for the long run, because there is no quick fix. So, but in the long run, even if they start today, and all of these things, for example, putting filters on power plants. So around Dehli and also in Pakistan, there are plants that emit sulfur dioxide, which is a very dangerous toxin, pollutant. And if just by putting filters, you can reduce the emissions by 60% or so. But then it's not implemented. So it's not that it's very difficult. It's just not a priority. But if there is public pressure, and governments actually start taking things seriously, they can implement. But when they share data, when they share expertise, when they share knowledge, when they share research, this can really open up many more avenues and also bring indigenous solutions. For example, we were just talking that in Pakistan, in Sindh province, there's a large scale production of environment-friendly stoves that are climate-friendly. And women in many parts of India, in the villages, still use traditional smoke stoves.
Okay.
So if that technology is it's transferable, if it's transferred to India, then they can also benefit. In the same way, Pakistan can also benefit. For example, Indian scientists have developed a liquid that can be used on stubble. And that stubble, you don't have to then burn the stubble because that liquid decomposes the stubble and the stalks, and it can be used as a manure.
How expensive is something like that, though? Because expense is a real key issue, isn't it? I mean, it's one thing, burning is cheap. These things cost money, and many Indian farmers don't have that money. How is it feasible for them to do things like that?
Okay, but it's not always money. I was reading that air pollution, India launched this air pollution program for around 130 cities, and Sandra may correct me. The aim was to reduce air pollution. And what Indian media has reported is that they have extra funds that have not been used in Delhi and in Noida. So sometimes it's mismanagement. It's not always lack of money. Money is, of course, an issue, but then many times it's just lack of political will.
Sandra, do you have any reaction to that?
Yeah, I would second what Beenish has said. Lack of enforcement, lack of initiative, lack of political will. It's almost like a roller coaster here that I say this, but I think really that is very crucial for this discussion. And also, I think Louise has pointed out the solution really in the end is cutting down emissions, and you need to do that. And if you think about the long-term costs of this public health hazard that we are all exposed to here in not just in Delhi, National Capital Region, but also in the surrounding areas, in Punjab, in Uttar Pradesh, in Haryana, neighboring states, that is costing so much more than sort of trying to invest now in the right direction, in better traffic management, better infrastructure that also takes the environment and emissions into account, better urban planning, all of that. Rather invest now than face the immense health costs that will only be added to the total cost later. And we already see that we have a lot of people with chronic diseases. For them, the only solution would be to actually leave the city and live elsewhere, which people that can afford it are doing, migrating seasonally, leave with a smog season and come back after. But of course, that is not a solution that millions of people here can afford to come to this big city to live a better life. So in the end, to come full circle, cutting emissions is key. And I sometimes actually have a bad conscience when I switch on my air purifiers at home, because what I'm doing in the end is I'm using energy that is most likely produced by coal-fired power plants that lack the right filters. So I'm actually adding to emissions by higher energy consumption because I want the air inside my rooms to be cleaner than outside.
Lots of food for thought. Sandra, Petersmann, it's been so great to get your insights from Delhi today. Thank you so much. And next time we'll have you on, hopefully here in the studio. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sandra.
Goodbye.
That would be lovely. Bye, guys. See you.
Bye.
So lots to think about there.
Lots to think about. I mean, it's the reality of life for people in Delhi. I mean, that is pretty shocking,
Absolutely.
You kind of just forget. And it's a good reminder as well for those of us who live in places, parts of the world where we have this privilege of actually just having nice, clean air most of the time. I was complaining this morning about those windy, cold conditions in Berlin today, but I'm not going to anymore. And we do have loads of actual chat coming in. And it was interesting, actually, what Sandra said there at the end about people just not being able to leave or wanting to leave. One of our viewers, Reasonable Human, is this person's name, says, I'm unfortunately Indian, okay? I've had to relocate temporarily to Delhi due to visa issues. Can't wait to leave this country next year. Okay, obviously not very happy with living in India, this one viewer. But also we have another viewer who says, whose name is Guana Alex, make environmental laws and enforce it, which is what we've been talking about a lot and seems to be one of the big issues with tackling this crisis at the moment. People seem to be it seems to be resonating with people.
That's what you're seeing too, right, Andrew?
Yeah, I think people are quite solutions-focused, which is good to see. And, excuse me, in our chat, in our poll, we asked the question, what would be the most effective way to cut air pollution in India and Pakistan, and we suggested 4 options, but people in the chat are suggesting many more.
Okay, good.
Just a quick update. Most people think that reducing stubble burning would be the most effective way to cut air pollution, followed by investing in clean energy and cutting industrial emissions. And also, in 4th place, that would be if India and Pakistan started working together a bit more on these issues. But in the chat, we've had people suggesting various other options, such as installing catalytic converters on vehicles to cut down on emissions, getting rid of 2-tact engines is another one. And Carolina, who is a regular viewer, suggested or asked about reforestation and whether that might help as well to clean up the air.
OK, thanks a lot, Andrew. Now, I want to move on finally and talk about climate change policy in India. Now that we have the COP29 summit happening in Azerbaijan, and Louise Osborne, our chief climate reporter, just tell us now, in the light of these talks, where does India stand now in regards to climate change policy, given, as you say, I think you said it was one of the world's top CO2 emitters and I think the 5th largest economy in the world, a developing economy. But where does it stand in all that?
I mean, India is part of the developing country bloc that is asking for a lot of funding to try to help them cut down on their emissions. I think they've asked for 1.3 trillion to do that. At the moment, pledges for funding are at 100 billion. So this is what they're negotiating at the moment. And I think that, Sandra really hit on it earlier where she was talking about, the costs to try to make some of these changes. And this is what countries like India are actually calling for, because they think that, despite India being, the 3rd biggest polluter historically, it is not the country that caused this problem. Historically, it is countries like the US and also Europe that have caused this. And so they are saying that they need the money to help them develop in a way that is going to limit their carbon dioxide emissions so that they can also grow and develop like the West has been able to do.
Now that you mentioned that, Louise, we can hear from the German Vice-Chancellor and Economy Minister, Robert Habeck. He was speaking exactly to that. Let's listen to him.
If the rich northwestern hemisphere is pointing to the other countries and saying, we don't allow you to produce enough energy, you can't become as wealthy and rich as we are. This is never going to work. So, of course, India, South Africa, China, all the other countries, Indonesia, they have the same right for their people to create the same wealth, the same educational and health system as we have. On the other hand, if these countries are doing the same as we have done, burning 100-year fossil energies, we are completely messed up.
Robert Habeck, the Vice-Chancellor and Economy Minister, Louise Osborne, just speaking really exactly as to what you were saying. Can you talk us a little bit more around this $1.3 trillion that India is asking developed countries to put towards each year for developing countries? How is that looking? Is it looking like it's going to happen, or we're not quite sure yet?
I mean, it's still hard to say. We're at a point in the negotiations where it's reached a bit of a standstill because you have the developing nations asking for all of this money, and then you have the developed countries basically saying that they want to see some of these emerging economies, China for one, some of the Gulf states, who themselves are big polluters, to contribute to that fund. And they are not willing to do that, not to be anyway obligated through this pledge anyway. India has also been asked in the past to contribute to such funding because it is a big economy. But
because it is classified as a developing nation, which means, as I understand it, no formal obligation to cut greenhouse gas emissions and technically still eligible to receive financial aid, though a country like China, which is regarded as developing, chooses not to receive financial aid.
Yes, yeah, that's right. So, I mean, technically countries like China and India can receive financial aid as part of this fund that or these pledges that I was talking about. But I mean, those countries are still, developing countries are still putting forward targets to reduce their carbon emissions. India, for example, has said that it would be carbon neutral by 2070, which is about 20 years, give or take, after most kind of Western countries. China has a target of 2060. So they are moving in that direction. It's just a case of like how they are going to do that. And, India is still using a lot of coal, for example, to power its economy. And when you think of India, it's a huge population of people, the biggest country in the world, 1.4 billion, something like that. So per capita, their emissions are still very low, much lower than the average, which means, they still need that ability to be able to power up. There are people who don't have access to electricity, and they are asking for support from the international community to do that. They're asking also for developed countries to cut their emissions, to give them the kind of carbon space to be able to do that.
Exactly, Beenish, go ahead.
That is what we should talk about, and that is, I think, where the pressure should be. I mean, of course, as Louise has mentioned, that it is just unfair to ask in countries like India to just stop their emissions. They have to grow. The demand is incredibly huge in that country, but I think that pressure on the Western industrialized nations, that pressure we should continue because they are not decreasing their emissions. They are also not even like, as far as, maybe Louise, you can correct me, but I don't think that the promises or the pledges have been fulfilled, because last I checked, Pakistan had not received anything from the loss and damage funds. And Pakistan, we all know, incurred like it was 2 years ago, the flooding. It has caused like massive economic Still, Pakistan has not recovered economically after those floods. 1,700 people lost their lives. People became poor, like millions and millions of people in Pakistan. But then there is reluctance, a huge reluctance to finally offer any money or where these countries can actually invest in maybe like adaptation mechanisms to deal with climate change.
And also, I just wanted to point out, I mean, let's not forget that we have a new presidency coming in the United States who, we're not sure what's going to happen, but right now we're looking at perhaps a radically different approach to climate to what we've seen. So, and that could be detrimental for all of us, right?
I mean, oil, drill, baby, drill was what he said, right? And yeah, of course, like the US having a presidency that's looking to pull out of these negotiations altogether, and, keep investing in fossil fuels means that, the emissions of the US, which is the second biggest emitter, are probably going to increase. But coming back to what Beenish was just talking about there, developing countries argue that actually they are paying the price at the moment economically, and also kind of, with regards to the fatalities and things they're seeing as part of these extreme weather events for what is happening with climate change, because, they are the ones who are at the moment having to fund their own changes to cope with climate change. And they are also the ones who are suffering these losses and damages as a result of, heavy rain, flooding, and all of the things that actually in the West we can deal with a little bit better, because our infrastructure is at a point where we can cope to a large extent with these issues.
I guess the big thing hanging over this, though, is funding, isn't it? If we're looking at COP29, and you were saying it's still not clear what's going to happen, how much of a game changer would this particular package of funding be if it's agreed to, this 1.3 trillion? What will it achieve?
I mean, I think 1.3 trillion, honestly, is a bit of a pipe dream. I don't think that they are going to get that level of funding. At the moment, from what we're hearing, it could be kind of 600 billion, something like this. But it would enable developing countries to invest in their renewable energy capacities, to build that up so that they can use wind, solar, etc., to keep developing without necessarily having to rely on coal and oil. It would also mean that they can put in place, things like seawalls, build sponge cities, so that they can cope with the extreme weather events that we are going to continue seeing with the level of warming that we have. Those things are not going to stop suddenly because of this funding, but at least countries could be in a position where they are able to deal with it better.
And Beenish, it seems Pakistan has not been able to deal with this for those very reasons. You mentioned the severe flooding.
Yeah, I mean, Pakistan, it is expensive. So for normal construction or a normal construction of a building, I think if you need like $1 to construct a climate resilient building, you probably need $4. And countries like Pakistan cannot survive if they do not have, in the next couple of decades, proper climate resistant construction. Because even as we are speaking now, migration is happening in countries like Bangladesh because of climate change. It's happening in India, it's happening in Pakistan. It's terribly dangerous situation in Bangladesh, where millions and millions of people are now forced to migrate because of climate change. And if there's a proper, if the Western world or the industrialized nations take it seriously, and there are proper mechanisms through which these countries start investing, and then simultaneously also trying to improve their governance, to control air pollution, to control, maybe enforce better laws, to regulate better fuel quality, to regulate power plants. Simultaneously, if all of these factors work together for multiple years, then eventually we may be able to see a world where things get better.
And the will has to be there as well, absolutely. Exactly as you say. How's the chat looking, Pablo?
Yeah, we've got some, as Andrew was saying before, there's a lot of interest in this topic. I'll read you a couple of the comments with regards to solutions, because we're going to try and look at this, that there are solutions to this. From Raja Shahzeb Khan, official, perhaps urban air pollution can be curbed if cities create a system of pipes that suck exhaust gases from homes and businesses and pump them elsewhere that can be safely disposed of. Maybe you can comment on that, Louise, if you know more on the topic. Investing is the best solution for cleaning air pollution, and it's the most efficient and effective way to reduce air pollution. And then with regards to this issue that we're seeing at the moment in India and Pakistan, the biggest seasonal reason for smog is stubble burning, which we've been talking about. So we've had plenty of comments on that. India should introduce new crop varieties that grow quickly and can be harvested by mid-October when the weather is warmer instead of mid-November. So there's someone coming with another solution to, or possible solution to the situation that we're having. And then we have other comments as well with regards to, we've had comments coming in with regards to politicians and corruption being an issue as well, which we've talked about extensively. I mean, what I'm getting from this chat, I don't know about you guys, is that it's essentially boiling down to a lack of will. Yeah, political will and essentially people sitting down and actually talking about how they're going to make changes and solutions. I mean, we have it here. We've had issues here in the European Union as well. You know, it's not just in countries, for example, like India and Pakistan, who haven't been talking to each other.
Democracies are also suffering in these countries. For example, we have seen what happened in Bangladesh. There was a revolution that kicked out the government of former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. She was ruling the country for 15 years. We saw first time that Prime Minister Narendra Modi was not able to get after like 10 years, he was not able to get enough votes. So there's also political, it's tricky, as Sandra has also mentioned. In Pakistan, a very popular politician is jailed. Imran Khan is in jail. So there is political crisis also. So the politicians, I think, are just grappling and dealing with their own situation to grab power, and the public and people are just not their priority. That is a challenge, a really big challenge.
Beenish, I'm just being told by Wade we have an appropriate auto and appropriate soundbite to finish the show on, sort of linking to what you've just said from the OPEC chief. Let's listen to what he had to say. I think it was today.
Oil and gas remain vital to producers and consumers around the world. As His Excellency Azerbaijan's President, His Excellency Ilham Aliyev, emphasized at the opening of COP29, they are indeed a gift of God. We need to embrace all energies, leverage all the available technologies, and ensure that the needs of all peoples around the world are taken into account. This means recognizing that the focus of the Paris Agreement is reducing emissions, not choosing energy sources.
A gift from God. That was the OPEC chief there. Final word to you, Louise Osborne.
I mean, I think that says everything, doesn't it, really? Yeah, this is a gift from God that we definitely need to be reducing our consumption of so that we can move forward. That is clear. And yeah, I think Beenish is right. There needs to be political will to make this transition that was promised last year at the last COP to move away from fossil fuels.
Thanks a lot, Louise. Andrew, finally over to you. Talk us through how people have polled in our poll question.
Yeah, well, we've had around 170 votes then in total. Thanks to everybody who cast their vote in our poll, asking what would be the most effective way now to cut air pollution in India and Pakistan. And the top, you voted 38% for reducing stubble burning, and that is followed by investing more in clean energy and cutting industrial emissions. And fourth, but in last position, is if India and Pakistan start working together. So, but like I said, there were many other solutions suggested in the chat. They're still coming in. We talked about China. Betty Lee says, learn from China. We talked a bit about that. Beenish mentioned it earlier. And a whole lot of other things. So thank you very much for all of your suggestions, for all of your votes and your comments as well.
And thank you very much, Andrew. Seems like people are quite optimistic about what can be achieved, as you were, Beenish, about the cooperation between India and Pakistan. I guess we have to leave it there, though. Unfortunately, there's so much to talk about. Thank you to everyone who's joined us online, and thank you to the people here around the table, Louise Osborne and Beenish, Javed, Andrew Devine, and to you, Pablo. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jared. It's been great. It's been a great discussion, and of course, Sandra.
Yes, thank you. And check out our community tab next week, around a day before the next news desk. That's when we'll put up the topic then, and you can start to weigh in on next week's topic. Thank you so much. Take care.
Take care.